All right, friends, welcome to day 2 here at Nachurs, where we have the learning panel. I am joined by my friends, and I'm going to tell you the topic. The topic today is stress mitigation, fact or fiction. In other words, can you affect your crops? Can you actually reduce the stress on your crops? Well, there's a lot of companies here that say we have a product to help you reduce stress, but can you actually do it? Let's face it, it's 105 degrees in Arkansas where Matt lives in the summer. There's no rain sometimes for 6-8 weeks at a time. Your plants are under stress. Can you actually, as a farmer, do anything about that? Well, that's what we're going to discuss today. Is it fact or is it fiction? And by the way, some of these guys do farm in some pretty tough environments. Our panel, Matt Miles from McGee, Arkansas, down, as he calls it, Little Vietnam, is some pretty tough conditions in southeast Arkansas. Then we go over here to Tennessee. Western Tennessee, Johnny Verell sometimes deals in some pretty tough situations. Last year, the rain, and then it stopped, and then it never rained again. And then we got Temple Rhodes. The stress he always talks about is how he can't actually put fertilizer on. Matt made a joke about that once. Yeah, Temple, boy, you know what? I just had to go around farming, no fertilizer. Well, it's not quite that bad, but there is stress, obviously, in Maryland, mostly from his own mental reasons. He's like sometimes, I'm stressed. Anyway, we love him. He's going to talk to you about what's going on with stress mitigation. And then we're joined by Tommy Roach. Tommy Roach is the guy that brings this all together and says, you know what, I want this topic because I want to hear what they can say about it. Tommy, why did you select this topic? Take his microphone, and then we're going to go down the line right here and talk about, can you actually affect the stress on a plant as a farmer?
So I often joke that you could walk from aisle 100 down there to aisle 4,000 down there, and everybody's got something, and by the time you walk the length of it, you've made how much? 200 extra. So is that fact or fiction? I say the first way you mitigate stress, and people may disagree with me, but it's through plant nutrition. That's the first level. Now, I'm not saying there's not products out there that you can add on top of that, but the first plant defense is with proper nutrition. And if you were here yesterday, we talked about balanced nutrition. That factors into it, but you can mitigate or manage stress to some degree with proper plant nutrition.
Temple, rolling on to you, all joking aside, you are one of those guys that is very much in the field. You're always getting your hands dirty. You're always looking at these plants. I've been to your farm at different times of the season, and you can say, stress, that's a problem down south. That's where they have these 106-degree temperatures. We don't have that in Maryland. We got this nice breeze coming off of the Chesapeake Bay, whatever. But we all deal with stress in our fields. I think you guys are all very good at looking at this. What's your stress?
Stress is stress. It doesn't matter where it is or where it comes from. Do you know the most stressful time in a plant's life is actually at emergence? So from emergence all the way through tassel, through grain fill, everybody's going to have a stress, whether it's too much water, too little water, too hot, too cold. Stress is stress. And in my opinion, I think Tommy's correct. When you get the plant up right and you stop learning about, everybody has a snake oil. Well, do you realize that one of the biggest snake oils that, I don't want to talk about snake oils, but I am. One of the biggest snake oils in the whole entire community of agriculture, it's fertilizer, because it's got the lowest efficiency that anything has. So what truly is a snake oil? Like, fertilizer can be a snake oil if it's used improperly.
Hey, does anybody want to tell Temple, we're being paid right now to sit in a fertilizer company's booth. I don't know that calling their product snake oil right now while we're being paid to be in a fertilizer company's booth would be the best move right out of the gate. But anyway, you do you.
Listen, it is what it is. But anything, if you don't use it properly, it doesn't work. And if you use fertility at the wrong time, it's not going to work. But if you use fertility right for what the plant needs, we're so worried in the agriculture industry, we've been stuck in our own way of we need to fertilize the ground, and the ground's got to be this, and this needs to be your base saturate or your baseline, and everything needs to be balanced. We've heard balance. There's nobody in this entire place at the Commodity Classic that has truly balanced soil, because I don't think that we've ever seen it. But what we do know is there is nutrient uptake charts, and I get tired of screaming this, but A plant is the same plant, whether it's at my farm, whether it's at Matt's farm, or whether it's at Johnny's farm. A plant is a plant, and that plant needs certain nutrients. And the one way to mitigate stress, period, is to give it the nutrients that it needs at the time that it needs it.
I want to go to John. By the way, I like that thing, a plant as a plant. And I want to get into this because the question could be asked, and I want to get to that when we go back to Tommy. I've got trees in my woods that will go through these terrible summers, and they don't have any rain for 2.5 months at a time. They make it without any hand of man. But also, these plants that we're planting are the farthest thing from natural trees. They've been doctored up and manipulated by us forever, so I think they maybe need more help. So I kind of see where there is a thing called stress mitigation. Johnny, you deal with it. I wrote down some notes preparing for this. In 2025, am I right about this? You had the spigot wouldn't shut off, and then it did. Did you do anything for stress, or were you just doing it to go out and salvage a crop when the weather finally cleared?
No, 100%. We were extremely wet. We lost pretty much all of our roots. It seemed like we couldn't get any type of root development. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do as farmers is anything we can do to stimulate that root growth so that we can get those nutrients that are in the soil, whether we're soil applying them in furrow, 2x2, anything like that. But exactly right, Damian. When it shut off, we went into like what we can do to keep that crop happy if we can get a rain underneath the pivots, anything like that. So it really changed what we were doing. We didn't front load everything last year. We went more into spoon feeding. I've been talking to Temple, and he's been telling me I need to really start doing that more and more. So that really saved us because when it shut off, we did shut off a lot of what we were going to do the rest of the season. But I'll tell you one thing that's interesting. I think Matt's number one variety on his farm is the same that's on my farm. It's the same on Temple's farm. And how we manage that crop is almost the same. The one thing that me and Matt had to fight that's a little different Temple's the nighttime temperature. But outside of that, we're really trying to manage the same corn varieties from one end of the country to the other end, and that's kind of hard to believe.
What you just said was between all three geographies, which are vastly different, really, and soil types even to maybe less different, you had the exact same yield almost with the same hybrid doing the same practices from Maryland to Southeast Arkansas.
Me and Matt are a lot closer in yield than Temple, but at the end of the day, it's the same varieties. We're all in that 115 to 120 day corn, and it's hard to believe that Temple is far north as he is. But what I'm saying is we're doing that because that gives us longer time to spoon feed when we do have the right conditions to get better grain fill and to push those yields on up.
Perfect. Would you please give Matt the microphone? I want to ask a question, Matt. First off, I'm going to ask you a short question answer, and then I'm going to go into my notes that I had prepared for this. Is stress mitigation something that you can actually do? In other words, fact or fiction? Can you actually change the stress on a plant by your practices or not?
Yes, maybe not to the extent Temple can. The number one yield influencer in our growing crops, any of us sitting here, is stress mitigation. That's not always a fertilizer. That's not always a stress mitigation product. That might be planting at the right time and the right temperatures and the right soil depth. Stress mitigation covers way more than just products. So fungicide, is a prime example. It's just like I say this, if you're sending your child to school, it's 40 degrees. You're not going to send them to school in a T-shirt and shorts. You're going to have a coat on them. Well, that's stress mitigation for the child. Same thing with the plants.
You guys hear what he said? All right. So I want to go over to Temple again. The one thing that I almost wonder if you have a leg up, from the very first recording I did with you 4 years ago, you talked about, obviously, how you had to be way earlier than most farmers about diligent, smaller doses of fertility through the season because of the nutrient management regulation that you face by the Chesapeake Bay. Do you think that gave you a leg up on reduction of stress because you were already out there 20, 30 years ago having to look at that plant and just barely give it enough to get it going? I mean, because it would seem to me that you were ahead of the curve on management of the plant through the season.
Well, we didn't have any choice. What choice did we have? It got thrown upon us, and we had to reinvent ourselves. So the only mindset that you have when the government comes in and says, we're going to cut your N and your phosphorus, and here's what we think that you need, and they had no data to back it up. And then it threw us all in a tailspin. So you were like, okay, so what do I do now? So the only thing that we knew how to do as the farmers in the Delmarva is to stop worrying about the acre and start worrying about what that plant needs are. What are the requirements throughout the whole entire growing season? Didn't matter if it was If it was corn, wheat, or beans, it didn't matter. We still had to worry about exactly what that plant needed at that time. What we didn't realize we were doing is we were mitigating stress because the plant was happy. If the plant's happy and the plant's healthy, we didn't realize what we were doing. So in reality, we tripped upon it because we had no choice.
All right, I'm going to go to, well, Matt still has the microphone in his hand. One thing that Tommy and I prepared our notes was about potassium deficiency. Potassium, as according to my friend Tommy, is the most important nutrient associated with stress reaction because of water relations and utilization. I wrote those notes down because he explained it to me because he's the agronomist, I'm not. You have a potassium deficiency. Does that make your job of managing stress even harder, not to mention the conditions of Little Vietnam?
Well, we just have to apply it. I mean, when we talk about, you good? Can y'all hear me? When we talk about fertility, and a lot of times we talk about fertility reduction, we've seen big results from reducing our nitrogen, even reducing our phosphorus some. You know, Temple can tell you that from living in it. The one thing I think we underapply is potassium. And potassium not only, works with stress mitigation, but it has many, many other things that goes along with it.
Johnny wants to talk, and then I want to hear from Tommy about the potassium acetate.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed the last few years that really changed on our farming operation, we went from putting out a form of potassium that was full of chlorine and salt and going more to a foliar style of potassium that doesn't have that, because when you're applying that to your soil, you're hurting the roots, you're hurting the plant, and it's making it a lot harder for the biology that's in the soil to help support that plant. So that's one thing I would throw in there. If you want to talk about stress mitigation, do away with your salt and your chlorine that you're putting in your soils, because that really changes how that plant's going to be thriving in that condition. We went to more of a foliar feed this year on potassium, and it's been a game changer. You can already start to see the difference in the soil type, or in the concentration of the soil right now.
All right, I want to go potassium acetate quick from Tommy, and then we're going to ask for questions, and then we're going to do our first round of trivia for a $25 gift card. If anybody has a question, go ahead and let me know so I can find you. Anybody got a question, statement, comment? All right, go ahead. Potassium acetate and stress.
So here's my 2 cents on this, and I'm not going to sit here and promote the seed company next door, the one down there, but these hybrids are built today to do what? Yield, 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 and yield. And one thing that's not factored in is that these hybrids change so fast. Like a 2-year lifespan is probably good, and we have no idea how these different hybrids react to fertility, and especially. You have all this increased yield that you're chasing. You have increased plant matter, dry matter that you've got to somehow get broken down and get nutrient back into the soil. We are, in my opinion, tell you for what it's worth, not applying enough potassium. Potassium drives everything else around in the plant. It helps all. We can't seed clouds. We can't control moisture. But what we can do, supply potassium to where it helps in plant water relations, helps in root growth, helps in photosynthetic capacity, because at the end of the day, plants got to make its own food, own sugars, own carbon, to keep making yield. And there's not enough potassium put out in the environment. People take a soil test, and what do they see?
What?
So many ppm of K, right? So many ppm. Is that so many ppm of K actually available to the plant? Who wants to answer that question? I answer it for you. No, it's not. And people chase their tail by applying, what do they apply, John? Potash, which is what he was talking about, chloride. So.
Any questions? Any questions from the crowd? Any statements? All right, our first round of trivia. Oh, we got a question from my hometown friend, Dan Blocker. Question?
Okay, seeing as how I'm in the business of selling snake oil,
Which is fertilizer.
and then one of his podcasts, he's telling us that I bring no value to the farm. And I'm like, geez, oh, Pete, Damian. Anyway, so you guys maybe pick a new farm up and got the soil test. So you are looking at parts per million. Will like a potassium acetate build you, well, also because I'm just starting to get into looking at some of this, like cost per unit. Can you build as well with this type, or do you still need some of my snake oil to the old barrel stave? If you got a low K number, can you fix it with acetate, or are you still going to need my snake oil?
I'll do it. Fertilizer. He's from a major fertilizer company. Sorry. So, no, there's no real building. And I mean, Chad and I can talk to this. A lot of times we don't know year to year in my area if I'm going to continue to have the farm. I have a problem with being able to build fertility in the soil. My soil type doesn't realistically build a lot of soil. If we were going to build soil in our area, I'm probably going to go out there and try to put chicken manure on to try to build the soil. But we're still trying to get to some kind of balance. I'm not saying that fertility is snake oil. I'm saying fertility not used correctly is snake oil because of the efficiency. The efficiency is the whole thing. Now, keep in mind, so if I pick up a brand new farm and maybe not sure if I'm going to hold on to it for 2 or 3 years, I'm not going to go out there and build fertility. I'm not going to do that. I am going to concentrate even heavier on building the plant. So I'm not worried about building the ppm in the soil. I'm worried about building the amount that plant gets into it. And when I take a sap sample or a tissue sample, I'm worried about that. I do not care what's in that soil at that time because I'm probably going to lose it in 2 or 3 years.
I'm going to give you a prime example. We talked about this the other day. So I took on a 1,300 acre farm this year. I'm going to disagree with Temple a little bit. And I would not have done this before this year with this farm. So I pick up a farm. I've been wanting it since I was a kid. It joins me, 1,300 acres. All the guy did was a little bit of NP&K. Low budget farmer, beautiful farm, beautiful ground, low budget farmer. Nothing against that. He made a living he quit when he was 80 years old. We took that farm. We even put 1.5 tons of litter on it prior to planting. Same week, same variety. We planted soybeans on that farm and a farm I've had for all my life, basically, since I've been farming. The farm that we picked up, the yields on the beans were 55 to 60. The farm that I've been farming was 85 to 90. So where did I pick that up from? If I didn't build it out of the soil, or if it wasn't already there, where did I pick it up from? I think we've been putting out litter since 2006. So, a lot of that had to do probably with the biology, because the biology's got to interact with the fertilizer, or not fertilizer, snake oil, I'm sorry. It's got to interact with the snake oil. But, he sells fertilizer too, so he can say what he wants to about that. But there is an advantage to having soil that's built up. Now, I think the biology part has a lot to do with it, but I think if you build the right base, then these products we're talking about work. If you've got a good base in your soil, then it's less stress right off the bat. That's kind of my opinion, and I may feel stronger about it now after the farm we took last year.
So remember, we're talking about two separate issues: building soil versus feeding plant. And it takes, like Matt said, it takes years to get either soil corrected or continue to maintain it. Most of the time when we're trying to correct, whether it's calcium, magnesium, potassium, we're doing it with gyp and lime and sulfur, which is gonna take years to get accomplished if we even ever get there. But in the meantime, we have to focus on what the crop needs this year. So we have to feed the plant.
Yeah, I would just say what all these guys have already said, but also there's been times where I 100% believe that you can go out there and you can put out 200 pounds of potash and you're not going to gain 120 units in the soil, even if you don't plant the crop. So the inefficiency of some of these, there are other versions out there that are better, but I would just say when you pick up ground, or, Temple's been to my place, me and Damian done some videos. I mean, we grow factories, it seems like, better than we do crops. So when you look at that, you can't go out there and just spend $50, $60 an acre for one product and expect it to be there for years to come before you get it, because we might not have it. So I think a lot of what Matt said, there is a need to have a good baseline, but once you can get that baseline in check, you don't have to you can reallocate and really spoon feed what that crop's needing at that moment and really help build that plant to produce the crop we want.
All right, stress mitigation. A lot of times people think it's just heat, and they say, I don't have that problem. I'm up in North Dakota. Why don't you explain where you see stress mitigation from your travels, and then what these guys can comment on of ways they've helped mitigate that stress different times of the year?
So y'all see this chart that Temple failed to say whose it was yesterday in the big panel, but he knows where it was from. If you notice,
I just use it a lot. That's all.
okay. So if you notice, and I'll sit here and talk about K all day, but there is a huge demand, and I don't know if you know Dan Poston. He used to work for the company across the aisle for a long time. We talk about it's a huge sucking sound once you get to that V8, V10 stage, all the way out past tassel. There's no way that you can supply enough K to a corn crop, to a bean crop. How much P and K does a 60, 70 bushel soybean crop take? More than a 200 bushel corn crop. And most people are taking care of that need in a 2-year spread from previous year's corn crop. They're treating beans like a cover crop, essentially. So why do we add more pounds of potassium? And it can't just be pounds. That's a trap people fall into because they equate pounds to dry to potash. You're not going to take care of your K needs with potash. Now, I'm not saying that that shouldn't be part of the equation, because we're not going to be able to supply enough K in a liquid diet unless you have a really, really, really good base established, and most people don't. So, how many people apply fungicide? Pretty much everybody. What do you use as a carrier? Most people don't even think about putting nutrition with fungicide. I don't know why, but I would say use potassium acetate as your carrier instead of, you can throw water in there, that's fine. But potassium acetate in with fungicide, zinc in with fungicide, because we're trying to keep the plant running. Stress can come in many forms. Heat, not enough water, too much water. Nobody can control nighttime temperatures nowadays. That's where the huge draw is here in the last couple of years. Have high nighttime temperatures, plant has no time to recover. Am I correct?
John, you want to hop on that and talk about whatever we dealt with? Johnny, bro. You'd think a professional would know how to work a microphone. Johnny Verell's going to hop in here and talk about his tips or tricks that he has used for stress mitigation. It could be about water. It could be about whatever direction you want. But I want you to, something you actually used and how it worked so these guys get a take-home I can use this on my farm.
So last year, like we started out, we had the wettest spring. We had one rainfall event. It was 14 inches right when we planted the crop. When you have something like that happen, you can never get the root development that you need. So when you start doing tissue samples, if you pull a sap test out of it, you'll see real quick that you're deficient in nutrients that are in the soil. We applied them out there. Our guy over here was talking about dry fertilizer. We put that out, but you cannot get it in the plant if you don't have the roots. So what we had to do is to go to a foliar diet to try to get this plant back in balance to where we needed to do. But we also had a lot of potassium in it. We added sulfur, moly, all those different nutrients that we could put into that plant that we had actually put out. We had already put zinc out at planting. We still did not have what we needed in the plant, and a lot of it comes back to we never had the infrastructure in the ground to get it to that plant. So, stress mitigation, we all talk about heat, stuff like that. Last year, probably our biggest issue we had was how we started off. And, we went 56 days with no rain after the 4th. That finished it off. But we were on a good track even when we started adjusting what we were doing throughout the season to get those nutrients in there. It really was working until we had the next event, which was no rain, Damian.
All right. Matt says, yes, my farming practices can reduce the stress. Everybody thinks where you are it's going to be heat. heat. Have you ever had to adjust for stress of cold in the southeastern Arkansas?
Not as much as we do heat, but I planted about 300 acres yesterday, so I'll probably have a little bit of issue at some point in time, first half of March, with cold there. But we do put stuff under it in the ditch to help with those kind of problems.
So what do? You put something. Did they not tell you it's still February and that's why you're out planting, or what's going on?
Yeah, I gotta have something to worry about.
So you put 300 acres out yesterday of corn
And beans.
and then tell me what you did as a stress mitigant adjustment for putting stuff out February 25th.
Well, we've just got we're gonna have a carbon source, a NutriCharge source, Risolink. We're gonna have our fertility K. We're gonna have all that in the ditch. So that's all the nutrients we need to build that root system to help protect with stress. Same thing on the soybeans in a lighter version.
And when he says in the ditch, he means in furrow.
In furrow.
Got it. Anybody got any questions for the guys? I got one over here from Joel from Oregon.
All right, so you were talking about using potassium acetate as a fungicide as a driver to help with it. Is there any reason it couldn't be a calcium acetate, zinc acetate, or is it the acetate formulation or specifically the potassium formulation? And assuming they will mix.
It's a little of both. We see as much benefit with the actual nutrient as we do with the acetate part, because there's lots of research, lots of data.
Tommy, bring it up a little bit so that they can hear you over here.
Okay. There's lots of data out there, and I've been doing this for 13 years now that shows what acetate does, and it's in many instances it's the same thing that potassium does. They both have an effect on photosynthetic capacity. They both have an effect on stress mitigation, water relations. All those are different pieces of the stress puzzle. Now, when you get into calcium and mag, can you add it to fungicide? Jar test. Calcium is very weird. There's only one nutrient that may be more cantankerous than calcium, and it's boron. It can work today, mixing stuff, and tomorrow it don't work. So jar test. He did a lot of foliar mag acetate, and
It was tremendous results. I don't know my low-hanging fruit was I am always mag deficient, but I needed to drive it in the plant, so he made me some mag acetate, and it was a huge benefit. But we talk about, back to what, Dan was talking about earlier, can we replace dry fertility like this? No, but back to what Johnny said, when you have an environmental problem and you don't have the root system to go and get these nutrients that are in your soil, you got to back up and reboot. So a couple years ago, one of the things that I had happen, I called Tommy. He was one of the first ones I called. I had an ALS injury, and it was bad. And my root systems were dying, and I needed to do something to get that plant back together. Well, I got the plant back together, and I fed that plant the entire time until my brace roots could come alive and go down and get more, because my regular crown roots and all my fibrous roots, they were dying. They were like, it was dying off. And I basically grew the whole crop on a liquid diet. So I disagree with some of these guys saying that we can't grow everything on a liquid diet. I've done it, and I know I can do it, and I can do it with an ROI.
All right, I want to throw it out here. I want to hear from everybody going down the line right here. I'll start with Matt. Matt, you've got irrigation on every acre you farm, and you've got genetics from these seed companies better than it's ever been. You've been farming since, 34 years ago. I'd say that stress mitigation is pretty easy when you've got the best genetics we've ever had in the history of agriculture and irrigation. I don't think it should really be that hard to stress mitigate. I'm being mean, of course, but that would be the perception from a lot of people. Like, what the hell is he worried about? Just turn on the spigot and plant great genetics, and as long as you get the fertilizer flung out there, you're fine.
Well, like you said, we farm the same variety in 3 different areas of the United States. So I'm going to have some stresses different no matter how high that thing can yield. It can be a 300-pound variety, and I may be 180 if I don't do some of the things we do to try to relieve stress.
Johnny, don't the seed companies make it so that the stress reduction as a farmer is a heck of a lot easier?
I mean, they do, but we talked about at the beginning, all these new varieties are for the high-end yields, and we're not all farming in that high-end yield environment. I'm predominantly dryland. We have a lot of irrigation, but it doesn't matter really at the grand scheme of things. But, one thing we hadn't talked about, Damian, is so many of these varieties, too, have different disease packages and stuff like that. There is products that we can put out there that are foliar, that are fertilized, high rates of copper, stuff like that, that can help stress mitigate from the disease sides, too, that we hadn't even talked about today.
I'm going to ask Temple the same question. All right, you're already forced to trickle out all your fertility because of the nutrient management. You've got the best genetics of these companies. Obviously, they're amazing. It's easier now to reduce stress than it's ever been, unless you think that somehow the stress has gotten harder.
Well, like I said, stress is stress. Like, it doesn't matter when it happens, from emergence all the way through tassel. Stress is stress. I will say, out of all the nutrients, in my opinion, obviously always go after the low-hanging fruit, because that's the easiest way to relieve stress, because it doesn't matter what nutrient it lacks in, it's going to throw that plant through some kind of stress. But for me, potassium, what does potassium really do for me? It helps that plant translocate water up and down the plant. So if it can bring moisture into the plant, it can't bring any other nutrients in if you don't have the potassium source. So don't ever let it become deficient.
Let's go through this wrap up before Temple has to head out of here and go to a different stage. I think the neat part of this is, and I was being a little facetious when I said these seed companies have made tremendous strides compared to when we were kids, right? And if you think about what stress mitigation is, we're already smarter. You guys have already done so much about applying things at just in time when it's needed to be there. You're already ahead of the curve. I think that the stress penalty on yields, especially from forward-thinking farmers like are here right now, is less than it's probably ever been, as opposed to maybe what you had in the old days. The stress penalty would have knocked you out. So I want your closing comment on, because we asked the question, is stress mitigation fact or fiction? Well, I think that it is fact, obviously, but it's probably better managed today than it's ever been.
I think it's 100% managed better than it was years ago. We didn't know. We've got more information now. Are we where we need to be to have the silver bullet? No. If we can ever get a product that will lower canopy temperature consistently all the time, something like that, that's going to be a game changer. But where we are today from where we were, for me, 10 years ago, is like night and day.
I think one of the biggest things that's changed farming in the last 10 years is how we're getting our data. We were doing traditional soil sampling, went to tissue sampling, now we're doing sap tissue testing, stuff like that. We're able to see those nutrients actually move in and up and down that plant, so we can tell what's going on. I think that's what's really helped us get to the next level in yield.
I'm going to make it real simple. See that chart? Start paying attention to them charts for every whether it's corn, wheat, beans, or whatever. They're out there. Follow that. Get ahead of them, not behind them. Proactive makes money. Reactive loses money. And that's the way to reduce stress. Not just stress on the plant, stress on your pocketbook. That's the most important one that we need to talk about in this future that we got.
I like it. Proactive makes money. Reactive loses money. Good deal. All right, Tommy, give me the wrap.
So lastly, I'm sure everybody's looked at the drought monitor lately. Just remember, drought typically does not get any better in the season. So it's already pretty bad in some spots right now. So placement of nutrient, form of nutrient is going to be critical in going forward in 2026.
We're going to stick around. You guys can stick around for a few minutes anyhow. These guys can stick around for a few minutes anyhow. I think that's a good time to wrap. Anyway, you always get much better information when it's one-on-one in terms of about your unique situation. Tommy Roach, the people of Nachurs, thank you very much for having us here. I'll stick around, say hi to you. And I got to tell you, stress mitigation, fact or fiction, we all agreed. And Temple's best little parting words. If you have not looked at the nutrient uptake chart, Nachurs is the only company that we work with that does this. Right over there, and another one right over here. Throwing out fertility when it's not needed does not help your plant. But more importantly, what'd you hear when we started things off with Tommy? The best thing you can do to reduce stress is create a healthy plant. Do that by the right timing of the nutrients. Anyway, that's Johnny Verell from Tennessee, and that's Matt Miles from the southeast part of Arkansas, joined by Tommy Roach, Texas Tech alumni as he were. That's Lubbock.
From Lubbock.
And I'm Damian Mason with XtremeAg. Thank you very much for coming here.